So this is one of the long free responses that you would have had. So I'm going to put it up here at the top. So this is a long free response. It would have been on your ecology exam. So it's one of the three. And this is the design a controlled experiment. So probably a good idea if we find in our notes, we're going to look for the page that we took together that has the pieces that are involved in that, and this is always at the end of the question, and it's not all the points, obviously, just like we did with the bomb bat. So I'll save that and move over here, and I'm going to do what the typical pattern of this is. Usually it starts off with, hey, I'm going to give you some information in the form of a graph or data. Do you understand how to read this information? That's usually part A. And then part B is usually, hey, you say you understand this information. Let me let you apply, how does this affect what goes on here? So they'll add something in. And then part C, they want you to design a controlled experiment. So this is the exact same pattern as the bomb bats. So I'm assuming we're going to start with A, and they're going to tell me, hey, can you read the graph? But I'm going to start up here because they're going to set some constraints and some context for me. So ecological succession. You may not know what that is. You've heard of it before. Succession is just the order of the different species of vegetation, plant life, that come in at different times. So if you start off with a field and it goes all the way back to rock, then you're going to go through primary succession where you don't even have dirt, and then you'll start having dirt and certain things come in first, like weeds, grass, scrubby looking things come in first and take over quickly. And then over time, those are replaced by more established type vegetation like trees. So, but that takes time. So that's what they're talking about, is this process of having different plants come in and colonize an area, and they do this in different order. That's what this is. Describes the pattern of changes in communities over time. So let's think about what they're saying there. The change in communities over time, that is this succession. And when they say pattern, they're talking about what I just said. You get things that the seeds blow in. They don't have to have very fertile soil because they're weeds. And they can establish, they don't have to have good light, they don't have to have good water, they can have bad temperature, it doesn't matter, they establish first. But yes, they establish first, but they can't stay there and outcompete the things that come in later that have more established roots, that are able to grow taller and block the light. So that's what that pattern is. The pattern is the very fast growing, low to the ground stuff at the beginning, and the slower growing, higher stuff at the end. Okay, so that's all they're saying here, is all we're talking about is we're going to have a bunch of different species and they're going to come in at different times. The graph below shows changes in plant diversity. So right here, that's what they've done. Here's what they've measured, and I know that because it's on the Y. So species diversity, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to write. This would literally just be the number of different species, I should probably write that, different species in the area. So it's just the number of species. Following the abandonment of a field that was used for agriculture. So it's not going all the way back to rock, it's got dirt there, but we're just going to let it alone. and see what happens in a temperate biome. So temperate means it gets warm during the day, cool at night, no crazy wild changes. Okay, so that's what they just said. We went over here, we went out in this field. We started counting the number of different species. And we did this over how long? I doubt that seriously, but whatever, 160 years. And they're going to show this change in certain groups of plants. Ground flora, shrubs, understory trees. Dadgummit. Oh wow, I'm always amazed with how much better that is. And canopy trees. So part A, I'm expecting this to be, hey, do you understand the information in the graph? Let's see what they say. Discuss the differences, okay, that's important, in plant diversity shown in the graph. Okay, so right here, these are your different plant diversity types, and they want me to talk about difference between them. So I'm going to compare them one to each other and explain how the changes affect the animal species composition between years 1 and 120. Okay, well there's none of that information there. This is only about the plants right here, because the graph below shows the changes in plant diversity. So this animal piece is going to be based on what plants are there at what time. So let's start with A. So I am supposed to tell you about how that these four things are different. So I see two things I want to talk about. One is this particular part of the graph, they're going to be more different species. There's going to be a higher number of different species of ground flora and shrubs, because these are higher. So they didn't do this, but this would be low and this would be high. So I'm going to write that. So ground flora and shrubs have, and I'm going to use their words, higher species diversity than, notice I'm comparing these to each other because they said differences. So what this really means is it's something called relative, because I'm only going to compare these one to another. So have higher species diversity than the understory trees and canopy trees. Whoops. Okay, so that's one piece of information that's obvious from the graph. Two are up here, two are down here. The other piece of information that I see is you've got pretty much slopes that are extremely steep right here and slopes that are extremely not steep, so slow. This is just going to mean slow, so the rate of change here. And so I'm going to write, I'll just start the same thing again, because it's the same two. Ground flora and shrubs. So this is a rapid increase in species diversity. Have a rapid increase species diversity. And I could even put, I'm kind of thinking that really in the first 40 years. So I don't know how I want to write that. I think I'm going to leave it alone. And because they really didn't get into time until here. And then these have, what are these? Understory and canopy. So a rapid increase. How about this? Because they said differences. Ground flora and shrubs have a more rapid increase in species diversity, while understory trees and canopy trees have a slower increase species diversity. So I don't know which one that's like the most important. I'm thinking either one. I don't know. I haven't looked at the rubric. But it's obvious there's two stories. When I look at this graph, the person who drew this, just saying, they always make their data up most of the time. They're showing you two huge big deals. There's a lot more diversity in this area than in this area. And this slope here is much steeper than here. That's the two big stories of the graph. And I just told them. I don't know which one they want. So what's B? Nope, just kidding. I have not talked about here with explain the changes. Explain how the changes, so you're getting tons of ground flora and shrubs really quickly. How does that affect the animal species? So initially, so early, because we're talking between 0 and 120 years, like real world words. So early in the succession, because that's what we're going to talk about, there's a lot of ground flora. Now you do not do this on a real test. Okay, I'm just walking you through this. There's a lot of different types, because that's what diversity means, of ground flora and shrubs that are low to the ground. What kind of animals live in this nasty little shrubs and weeds? What kind of things would you find? So there would be, like, there wouldn't be large herbivores there. There'd be small ones, like rabbits maybe, things that could hide there. Birds really wouldn't be there yet because there's not real trees. There's always bugs, so insects. I think what else there would be. I don't know. I think I'd leave it there. Okay, and then later in succession, there's a lot of, what do they call them? Understory trees, understory, and canopy trees. So they're saying now you're getting taller, like there's bigger things. So what would live there? Birds. So now we'd have birds. Bugs are always there. And larger, that's what I want to say. And larger herbivores would live there. Okay. Not beautiful, but it's important. So here's what you need to do to make sure you don't miss points. When it said discuss the differences, I'm going to go up here. I did the differences. I'm going to check off that dark box, that word. I did that right here. Here's the discuss part. You could even come over here and put the bold word there. There's another word in bold here, explain. I'm going to check it off. And I did that right here. So I know, because here's what happens. Most of the time I go grade stuff and people don't do this part. They totally skip it. Because they're so into the graph part they did, they totally forgot there was another part. So don't do that. This was easy. So I had two up here. I checked them off. I wrote here on the side where they are. So identify two biotic two abiotic. Identify just means name. Name these two, and then discuss how they would influence the pattern. So when they say this, they mean either more or less diversity. How do I know that? Because the two trends are more or less. So that's one of the two patterns. Or fast or slow slope. Rate of change. So would it speed up this, slow this down, speed this up, slow this down? Okay, that's what they want. So let's start over here for B. So two biotic. So I'm going to just list them. Let's think what a good biotic. Let's do herbivores. So one biotic factor is herbivores. So what happens if you have more herbivores? Like, let's think of a pattern, which usually means proportions. More herbivores would mean what with that rate of change? The plants would have to constantly be fighting against that being eaten back. So I would say, how do they word that? To influence the pattern. So you would say one biotic factor is herbivores. If there were more herbivores, then how do we want to put that? Slopes, rate of change. Let's do rate of change. They don't do slope. That's a mathy word. Then the rate of change in species diversity what would it do? What would it do to this graph? So yum, 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 yum. They're going to eat everything, right? We didn't say small or large. So everything's going to have a lower, slower rate of change. Would have a slower rate of change. Let's change that, because they're all increasing. A slower increase in species diversity. And it's over time, because that's my rate. Okay, there's one biotic factor. Let's pick another one. Another biotic factor. Now, this is identify, so I'm assuming this is worth 2 points. Name it, explain it. Then I'm going to have to name it, explain it. So, I don't know, let's put disease. Most of y'all put that on your test. Another biotic factor is disease. So here I'm going to go again. If there is more disease, let's just go with the pattern of more diversity, less diversity. Then there would be less overall, that's saying on all four species diversity. Because you'd have fewer that were actually there. Because some would, I could say that, there would be fewer number of species because some would go away, die. Okay, let's put die from disease. Oops. Okay, there we go. So let's go over here and let me fix that one. I might want to write a little bit more. For herbivores, then the rate of change would have a slower increase in the species diversity over time. I'm just going to put because the plants have to grow back from the increased herbivory. Okay, I'm happy with that. Oh, am I supposed to do now? 2 abiotic. Oh, okay. So 1 abiotic factor is, we'll do rainfall. It's rainfall. And then I'll write the proportion if there is increased rainfall. Then you should have the plants grow faster because there's going to be an increase in photosynthesis. So we could do the rate. So then there would be an increase in the rate of change for species diversity. So here's my pattern. If you notice, you get into a pattern in the way you write your sentences. We did this with bombats. So I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to tell you what the proportion is, the more, and then I'm going to add because, and I'm going to say why. So 1 is rainfall, increased rate of change, because there would be an increase in the rate of photosynthesis. Again, you better write it all out. Okay? So I'm going to do the same kind of pattern. Another abiotic factor is, so do I want to do temperature? Not really. Do I want to do, I did rain. Let's do light. Is light. So I'm going to do the proportion now. So if there is increased light, then there would be an increase in the rate of change. So the slope, because they'd get there quicker, species diversity, so the more. So I'd change the slope to being a faster slope, and the reason is because there would be an increase in the rate of photosynthesis. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to need more paper. I think what I'll do is I'll steal this page right here. So, now what did they ask me to do? Here's your design and controlled experiment. To determine how we're back to diversity, so they're saying this just means the number of different plant species in a newly abandoned field, so this exact same thing, would be affected by large herbivores. Well, I already talked about that, so that's a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to design an experiment. So I'm going to start off with, I'm going to turn this way so I can see. Because I want to see what they're asking me to test. They said to determine how, so this is affected by, so I'm going to rewrite this in my own head. So to determine the effect of large herbivores on the diversity of plant species. So I'm going to start off with that. So the effect of, after I say the effect of, this is what I'm testing. So this is the large herbivores. That's what the test is. Do you have cows in the field or not? And what are you measuring? The diversity of the plant species. So diversity of the plant species, and really I need to be more specific about that, but I'll do that in a second. So this is straight from the prompt. So now I'm going to write my null. There is no significant difference in what are you measuring the diversity of plant species based on what are you testing? The presence of large herbivores. Okay, so I know that's one part. I know that's another part. I need to give a control. So in this case, we said the control, you always say this. My control group is no whatever you're testing. So what are you testing? The presence of large herbivores. So your control group would be a field with no herbivores. So no large herbivores. I'll do my one they always want. Thank goodness, because it's a cheat. So I'm going to repeat the experiment 3 times. I'd write that out. Most of the time they want you to state what you're going to measure. So what would I do? I would measure, what are you counting? That's what they're saying. So you measure by counting the number of different plant species, that's your diversity. Okay, so how often would I do that? What's reasonable? Got a cow in the field. Let's do it weekly. Every week. How they did it for 160 years? Is that how long they did it? I'm not doing that. For, I'm going to say 5 years. For 5 years. That's a lot of work. Holy cow, I hope I never have to do that. And then I try to do the predict conclusion, and I told you what I like to do. Like, I do think the more herbivores, the lower the difference. And I could say that. You know, that's option 1. I could say the more herbivores, the less diversity. And the reason is because that you're going to have some of the plants die due to herbivory. I don't think that's hard. I know that. That's not crazy. Let me write this out. But the other thing I could do is just say, I'm just going to accept there's no difference. Just saying. And then you want to write out what that means. You want to say, you accept the null because there is no difference in the number of plant species with and without the herbivore. So the only other one I can think of that I might want to put in there is to let them know, I do know that my groups of, so my areas, my field, I'd have to have the fields cut up, the field cut up into pieces that had the same, like the same plant species and the same area and the same everything. So maybe I want to state that. What am I going to hold constant? So I'm going to divide the field into, and I'm not going to do levels of treatment. I'm not going to have, I guess I could. Let's do it this way. Into 4 equal size sections. And this is what I want. I want them to have the same plant species present. I want them to have the same amounts of water and light. And then I could have in the 4, I could have 0, maybe 5, 10, and 15 cows on each one. And here's what I'm hoping to prove by that. So the more cows, the more herbivory, the less diversity. So that's what I would want. So the more cows, the less, whoops, just kidding. The more herbivory, the less diversity. But there's no way you would need all that, because this isn't a 10-point part of a 10-point question. I think this question's old enough that it actually falls into being worth 12. So let me think about that. So we had, I'm guessing this will be worth 2 points here, because you wouldn't want both. And then here we would probably have it early and then later, so this is probably 2 points. So that means A is worth, I'm thinking 4. And then say it, discuss it. So now I'm going to go fix this. So here I identified 1, 2, 3, 4. I did that. And then I discussed, all of these were discussed. So I didn't miss anything. So I think that's worth 4. And these old ones used to be worth 12. So this has to be 4. So I'm guessing if I had to pick which ones I would keep, I'd always keep the null. I might combine the control and the independent variable. Always keep the repeat. And then any of the other ones, I think you'd be okay. Just pick one of those. I think that'd be fine. Okay, so that's this question, and you're going to have one that you have to do by yourself, and that's going to be on your test. So you're going to get the points for doing this one. So you're going to write this one in Google Classroom based on watching this video. So that's going to be worth 12 out of 12. You better get all 12 points, because I so wrote it for you. And then I'm going to load another one in there that you have to do this pattern to and do it by yourself. And I'll grade that one, and that one will go on this test. Okay, so now I'm going to load these in there. So let's go through and make sure we understand what we're doing. So you're responsible for taking all of this and typing it without this kind of stuff, okay? Real words, write it out, and batch it into your parts. So this question will be loaded into Google Classroom. And you're going to do this, and you should make a 12 out of 12. So I'll score this one. It'll go on your test. If you do not make a 12 out of 12, we're going to start having parent conversations. So I'm just letting you know. Then I'm going to put one on there that you have to do based on this pattern and using your 10 things. It's another design and controlled experiment, but it's going to have the, hey, do you understand this information? Tell me that you do. Hey, since you understand this information, what if I give you some other things? How would that fit in with this? And then design. That's going to be on your test. So, I do not care if you work with each other. If you work with each other, you better tell me who you worked with. Because we run them through plagiarism, but I remember pretty much everything I read. So if I've read it before, I'll know I've read it before. So you need to write your own. But if you wrote it with someone, just tell me. I wrote this one with Ben Godsey. That's what I would put up at the top. And then when I read them and I think, oh, dang, that sounds a lot like Ben Godsey's. Well, that's because you worked with them. Okay, I'm fine with that. So I don't care. You can even work with 2 or 3 people. Doesn't matter. We're learning. This isn't about that. All right. Okay, you're good. I'm taking my glasses off.